In thinking about how it was possible for a general hospital to be the home base for a psychiatry department of this size and scope, it really is in some ways a puzzle. I mean, there's nothing like this in the world. A freestanding general hospital with hundreds of psychiatrists and psychologists doing research, taking care of patients, training the next generation, the second largest department in the hospital in terms of number of doctoral level staff. Those who were responsible for the initial gift would be staggered to see what exists here now in its breadth and scope and depth and quality. It's a remarkable place.
It's hard to know where to begin in terms of the benefits of being part of Mass General. Part of it, I think, is just to have colleagues of this stature. Really sort of raises the level of one's game, that it really has very powerful effects to be surrounded by people of this caliber.
One of the great things about the Mass General and for everybody, and I've told this to many students, is anything you wanted to do, they might not help you to do it. But the great thing is they didn't stop you.
In my early years, I don't think that I was that knowledgeable about psychiatry. Being the typical young surgeon, namely a chance to cut is a chance to cure kind of a mentality. But the older I got, the more I became aware of the importance of the patient as a whole person. And one of the great things about this place is the Department of Psychiatry.
I think one of the features of our history that has allowed psychiatry to take root in a renowned general hospital was the first chairman of the department had impeccable traditional medical credentials. I mean, he was a neuropathologist. He was literally somebody who would cut up brains and look at them under the microscope.
When he lectured, he could use both hands on the blackboard at the same time. And the medical students, of course, were all just overwhelmed by that.
Dr. Cobb cared for an old Brahmin in the Back Bay for many years with the expectation that upon his death there would be a bequest to the hospital and to the department. The will was read and he bequeathed to the department his brain. And Cobb, dismayed by this, went to the trustees. They made a suggestion that Dr. Cobb accept the brain, that he stain it, section it, study it, and send a report to the estate, which he did, sent a large $50,000 bill to the estate, and they paid. So yes, he was a neuroanatomist and an early pursuer of philanthropy.
Boston has always been a huge center for neuroscience. Many Nobel laureates here. All of us come from backgrounds that are very strong in the sciences, and when I've worked with psychiatrists at other institutions, that scientific tradition really isn't there. And I think part of the reason why we all feel so comfortable interacting is we all speak the same language.
There are many occasions in its history where the advances that have come out of this institution are a consequence of our responding to and caring for the needs of our community. The then Chief of Psychiatry, Eric Lindemann, began to talk with the survivors and families and was the first to understand the process of bereavement people experience after trauma and loss.
He really researched the human adaptational challenges that burn patients face.
That historic publication was one of the first examples of how this department has mobilized to try to improve our ability to respond to the psychiatric consequences of traumatic events. And our most recent initiative, which is to develop a program that will help with this national tragedy of young people returning from war with psychological scars.
Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we are proud to announce the start of a major new effort to support local veterans and their families. This landmark project has been named the Red Sox Foundation and Massachusetts General Hospital Home Base Program. This program is designed to help veterans affected by two debilitating and common wounds: traumatic brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder.
This is a description of a combat veteran's traumatic event. You're flying back up to an infantry unit. Voices over the radio begin screaming that they're taking heavy fire. As you fly into the hot area to rescue them, you feel your heart beating faster and the adrenaline pumping. Everything is chaotic. Now your helicopter is being fired upon. After they hear the retelling, they're instructed to close their eyes and reimagine the event as if it's actually happening again. And then while they're doing that, the cameras in the PET scanner are recording the radioactivity in various areas of their brain, a reflection of how active certain areas of the brain are in response to hearing the script.
And finally, at home plate, representing the heart of the home base program and the new Veterans Clinic at MGH, please welcome MGH Dr. Jerry Rosenbaum.
Jerry has had the leadership that's allowed the maturity of the department to settle in and to really, look way beyond the boundaries of MGH and our place, in the nation in terms of psychiatric research and clinical care to international frontiers.
We're not here just to absorb what we were taught, apply it, and then pass it on. We got to make the world better. That's always been the tradition of this hospital.
Jerry is really a unique leader. He has a style that just by his nature inspires and motivates people to do the best they can.
Our latest home is the MGH Comprehensive Clinical Psychiatry textbook. Roughly 145 of the 175 authors are active members of our faculty.
What I like is coming up with new ideas and brainstorming with our leadership team. Less than a year ago, we had this idea of starting a program, state-of-the-art, comprehensive assessment of children with learning problems, emotional problems, developmental problems.
I think there are many places where child psychiatrists don't really feel like doctors, and psychiatrists don't feel like doctors. Here we are.
I believe very strongly the research that we do can change the world.
Joe Biederman, in my opinion, is the Marco Polo of child psychiatry. He's the person who went to where nobody else had ever thought you could go.
A great joy in my life was that 15 years ago, I was offered the opportunity to work with Dr. Biederman. The most important thing, though, that he may have taught me over the years is actually the radical notion that we should listen to patients and their families.
We now have what we think is going to be like a Framingham study for child development and neuropsychological development. If 1,000 kids a year at the minimum are coming through, what an incredible opportunity suddenly we have that didn't exist 8 months ago. It was just a program that we started. We do this all the time, and that is what's thrilling, is to just see things that weren't there that are now there today, things that were small that have gotten big. The roots of it clearly are the focus that the psychiatry department has always had on the care of the medical and surgical patient, what's called consultation liaison psychiatry.
And some of the department's greatest leaders have risen from the ranks of consultation psychiatry service here at MGH.
In most hospitals, about 1 in every 200 patients is seen by the psychiatric consultation service, and in this hospital it's 1 out of every 8. Physicians here really value the input from the psychiatrists, and psychiatrists play a very active role in the care of many of our patients outside of psychiatry.
When I started, it was a very small department. Psychiatry was very small, and under Tom Hackett's leadership, he brought credibility to the field of psychiatry to medicine. And that laid the groundwork for everything that developed afterwards.
Tom holds a special place in my heart. He was interested in people, he was exceptionally charismatic, and he had a tremendous booming laugh.
The limbic system is important, apparently, because many times people will laugh at something. You'll see this with fellows all the time, or residents. What are you laughing at? Oh, nothing. No, seriously, what are you laughing at? Well, I don't know. And what had happened is I tickled his limbic system. And therefore he had this motor response of smile. And he didn't know what the hell it was from.
I am Nedley of Cassine, and I run this service. And I am here this morning to convert you all.
He's Catholic, I believe a Jesuit. Doesn't act like a Jesuit, but he is.
This topic of a patient's religion is actually a topic that is avoided aggressively in psychiatry. The suggestion, I was curious, was that it's best placed on the consult service. My thought is it's probably best placed at the beginning of residency.
I remember one case of a man who came from South America. He had cardiac surgery, and after the surgery he became delirious. In the course of treating this man, I made him catatonic. And I called Ned, and he said, oh my gosh, this isn't a good thing. He chose a medication called lorazepam. The patient rose up out of bed, said, I have to go to the bathroom, and I'm hungry, and the nurses, their eyes were popping out of their heads. Dr. Kassem, what did you give the man? And as he walked out of the room, he said, holy water. That led us to study the use of this medication in catatonic states. And to make a long story short, now it is the first-line treatment for this disorder.
I take care of sick people, and right now my specialty is palliative care, helping people meet the end of life as a unit, the family and the patient.
He used just wonderful judgment and wonderful sensitivity.
We are just constantly enriched by this resource of extraordinarily gifted people, not just smart. Because of our ability to select, we get to do smart and really nice people, people who you would send a family member to.
Jerry talks about reaching an escape velocity to get out of this gravitational pull. It's not easy because so much is happening. We say, well, where would it be better?
It became very important to ensure that people had a place, a future, to send their grandchildren to, where there would be someone to listen to them. I began something called the Center for Psychoanalytic Studies, and then to help support that kind of thrust, we founded this endowment for the advancement of psychotherapy.
We're very lucky to work in a hospital where the hospital is so supportive of a very robust mental health clinical service. Most tertiary care hospitals do not provide on-site the level of care that our hospital does.
If you look at the statistics about the number of people in our society who suffer from a psychiatric disorder, it's actually a staggering number. 1 in 5 people at some point in their lives will experience major depressive disorder.
Tonight, groundbreaking research on treating depression.
They showed us how it's done during this behind-the-scenes look at the research at Mass General.
I've had the opportunity to be the co-principal investigator of STAR-D, the largest study ever conducted in depression.
After a baseline test, a patient begins taking an antidepressant and repeats the brain scan a week later. And if it's unfavorable, they can tell that the particular antidepressant probably won't work.
This is a very important message of hope to our patients.
One of the things that we do is to work on novel behavioral treatments, and I think one of the treatments that's very promising involves neuroimaging and involves helping people to understand what happens in their brain when they crave, so that they can learn a way that works for them, a unique way to reduce their craving.
Many of our individual programs, whether it's depression or pediatric psychiatry or OCD, and the size of those programs would dwarf whole departments of psychiatry at most places.
What we have back here is a locked psychiatric unit, part of the emergency department, where we see patients who come in from all walks of life. Ms. Bergeron. Hi. Dr. Smith. Come on back. It's very unique, a model of care that many people look to try to achieve across the country. You know, this is the premier place to train in that regard, so I was thrilled to come here.
It sounds cliche, but I look forward to coming to work every day. I feel like my colleagues are not only my colleagues, but my friends. And there's no doubt in my mind that that comes from the top. It comes from Jerry Rosenbaum, who is an extraordinary leader. We all have this sense that we're working together on very important problems and that each person's success is everybody's success.
I honestly think that the neurosciences are in a position to make the most impressive strides forward in terms of improving healthcare in the next 20 plus years.
Some of the most important genetic advances, many of which have emerged from our department, have involved looking genome-wide at what are the variants in the genome, what are variations that contribute to things like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder and autism, for example. And we've had some successes, some really pretty exciting successes.
The goal is not just to find genes, but to be able to understand how they produce disease in an individual, and then also to be able to get a lot of clues about where to target the development of novel therapeutics. The pipeline for psychiatric disease in terms of new drugs is really empty.
There's no end to the challenge in front of us, so I find that amazing.
We need to be humble about how complex this is going to be. There is so much research to be done.
If you don't go out and try to do it, it won't happen. And when you do, things happen you could never expect. And he says, I learned a deep respect for one of Goethe's couplets. Whatever you can do, or dream you can, begin it. Boldness has genius, power, and magic in it. And I said, wait a minute, that's what I believe. That's the whole story right there in a nutshell.